So before we set our discussion and topic, let's set in the train. And Mr. Kai, I'm going to start with you. What do we mean with entrepreneur and entrepreneurship? How can we define it in general?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the question. Thank you very much for having me here at this panel. So for me personally, entrepreneurship is looking at an activity through a broader lens of how do I build something, how do I create something that just goes beyond, I have a certain task and I complete this task, but looking at the own activity, there's a much broader canvas that takes into account, I have an entity, and I give this entity a vision, a mission, and I design and define the pathway to get there. I think that's the way that I would define entrepreneurship, which can be, as many of my esteemed colleagues here on this panel have done, really founding a company and starting it. But this can also be taking an existing company and turning it into a new something new, into a new phase for that organization.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay with the same topic and with you, Dr. Nafez. What defines an entrepreneur and how it does differ from traditional business practices?
I'd love to get a PhD, but I'm not a doctor yet. So I'd say, building on Mr. Kai's comments, I think you can define, so in our business, in our line of work at Builder, we incubate and spin out companies. So we have a very specific definition of an entrepreneur as somebody that wants to build a VC-backed company. But I think it's really important for society that we broaden that sort of scope to, entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs in any sort of line of work, where people, to Mr. Kai's comments, like take ownership and take it to the next level. I think, we see that every day, especially, for example, if you've ever worked with the UAE government or any of these entities, you see, entrepreneurs in government, and that's something that's become very common here. And just to link it, I think, to everything we've talked about here in terms of education, we really need to start thinking about education systems that enable people to excel to that level of, or that standard. And we can talk sort of about that more, if we have time, but that's how I think about it.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Qudus, to link it, as Mr. and Dr. Nafez mentioned, to link it with the education, especially formal education sector, how did your formal education influence your entrepreneurial path and pursuits? And did you have to fill the gaps during your journey that there were some gaps in your traditional education?
Yeah, I started ASI when I was still in high school, so I was doing both at the same time, so it's hard to differentiate. But I definitely think, traditional education doesn't, fully prepare you for what the startup world is, but at the same time, I think nothing prepares you for what the startup world is, right? There's no degree, no experience, no work experience. You could be in any position, and you're still learning on the job. The most capable and talented and reputable founders I meet have the same things to say as I did, and they've got decades more experience than I do. So I think when you look at entrepreneurship, the wrong way is to look at it as, is education preparing me for entrepreneurship? I think the better way to look at it is, are you willing to look at entrepreneurship as an education pathway? And I think, I can very easily say that I've probably learned more, building a company than I have or could have going to university or going to high school or any of the above. But I do think the value of the current education system, despite its flaws, does teach you to be resilient. I think even when we're hiring, I don't have a university degree myself, but when I see somebody with a university degree, I know that they've spent 4 years probably doing something they don't like very much, and still stuck through it, went all the way to the end, and they were able to sort of have that resilience. So in that way, I still think traditional education is important, where people are almost being forced to do something they may not like, they may like, but and that's the law of what the startup world is, right? It's not all speaking at the World Government Summit. There's weekends and days where you don't speak to your family, your friends, and it's a difficult time. So yeah, to answer your question, I think education may not directly prepare you, but I definitely think it's an important foundation to have at least some form of education.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I want to hear it from you as well, Robin, especially having a different path in education, unconventional early education system. I think you joined maybe school by 15. How did this journey, unconventional journey, played a role in your entrepreneurial spirit?
Yes, absolutely. This topic is very close to my heart because I didn't go to formal school until I was 15. I grew up in the bush in Botswana and started my first business at 10 because my parents said to me,
Wow.
if you want pocket money, you need to earn it. So I have been forced to be an entrepreneur, a willing one, I should say, and then went into formal education. But I think what's interesting is my brother and I both became entrepreneurs, both tech entrepreneurs, and I think that was by dint of an unconventional education that definitely steered us in that direction. And then we went to leading global universities. So it didn't stop us being able to participate in the formal education system. Just to link it to today's topic in particular, entrepreneurship is a wonderful teacher. It's also very relevant in today's world where metacognitive skills are more and more important, thinking about thinking. It teaches you to do that because to me, entrepreneurship is solving problems through experimental methods at its simplest. So it teaches you to think about thinking. To me, it's a better teacher of resilience than an academic degree because, as you say, it's so hard. So I would much rather in my company hire an entrepreneur than someone who's got a high school, university degree if I had to choose. Both is a bonus. So it teaches resilience and it's about solving problems. So just to end, I think we're trying to create an education system that develops people who are contributing members of society. And if we develop entrepreneurs, they will be thinking about how to solve the world's most important problems.
Yes. You think that applies for everyone?
That everyone should be an entrepreneur? No, I don't. But back to the first definition, it doesn't have to be about starting businesses or organizations. It can be a mindset. Again, an approach to here's a problem in front of me, and here's how I can think about it differently and experiment with solutions. And the way the world is going, we all need to be thinking in those terms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Regarding this, Mr. Kai, how can formal education incorporate with experiential learning and also a lifelong learning itself to mirror entrepreneurial skills and aspects?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I love what you just said. It's what it really is and what you need to instill in kids and later adults in university is that openness and understanding that it's not necessarily about the way the task looks like, but it's about what is the underlying problem that's being solved. So even if someone comes to you, and this doesn't necessarily even mean that you need to have your own company, but it can be in any job that your boss comes to you and says, please do A, it's that you think not necessarily what is it that I was exactly just told, but what problem am I solving for the person that's coming to me, and then really opening how you think about what your realm of possibilities and things that you can do are. And I think that is something that universities and educational institutions of any type can teach. I think then when it comes to clear skills in terms of how do I do AI, how is generative AI, how is cloud computing, those are a little bit different because those are kind of hard skills. IBM recently stated that those skills have an expiry of about 2.5 years. Those you constantly need to refresh, and those you constantly need to learn. And the way that higher education is set up today, that's very difficult because typically that's very front-loaded in your career, and then it stops. So this is where I think we need to look at the education system and open it up much more, thinking about stackable degrees, thinking about how can you have other ways of proving that you have proficiency in something and that you have built skills other than necessarily sitting for several months or years in a classroom.
Yes, thank you very much. And Dr. Nafid, I want to ask you about, because there is some attempts and new models, potential new models. Actually, I can name Elon Musk's Nova Astra, and I think you being an investor in Synthesis.
Synthesis, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I would like to ask you about these new models under experimentation that foster or trying to foster entrepreneurial skills. Is entrepreneurial skills for everyone? What do you, how do you balance actually between innate versus thought in getting into entrepreneurial skills?
I mean, so like you said, I mean, I'm an investor in Synthesis, which is a spin out of Elon Musk's work with the Ad Astra team around SpaceX. But I think, the underlying theme here, and to build on sort of what Kudus was saying, what everybody's saying is, we're talking about a pedagogy, to be technical, constructionist pedagogy, problem-based learning specifically. And I think the analogy that I like to use that makes it much easier for people to grasp this is most education, I'd say K-12, higher education, we're teaching people to memorize a manual for a game, and usually a game they will never play. It's as if, I want you to play football, I want you to play basketball, I want you to play, obviously, paddle now in the UAE, but I'm going to have you read the rule book. That's usually not very useful, versus actually getting you to play the game from day one. And that's obviously the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship, is you're solving problems every day. And entrepreneurship as a extreme constructionist pedagogy, I think, is super interesting and super relevant. And that brings us to the question is, do you want everybody to be an entrepreneur? I think we want everybody to think like an entrepreneur. We don't necessarily need everybody, and I don't think everybody should start a VC-backed company. I don't think that's the only way to create an impact. I think there are much better ways to create an impact, even as somebody that invests in these companies. And there are a lot of models out there. I think Synthesis is a fascinating one. I think Replit is another education in the US that people don't think about as an education company, but I do think about as an education company with Copilot and AI and all the scaffolding that you can put around that. And again, I'm conscious of time, but
no, it's okay. It's okay. I want to hear it from you and from our esteemed speakers as well about this, and about also experimental learning, Mr. Kudus. How do you see it? How can we implement it? Because some say, especially most of entrepreneurs, choose and prefer hands-on learning and experiencing failure and etc., ups and downs, that foster their resilience and their ability to cope with this unstable field. What do you think? Can we incorporate them in the education or formal education system?
I mean, I definitely think we can. I don't know if we will, but the hope is that we should. I mean, I think what's really great about the UAE, and we at ASI work very closely with the UAE Ministry of Education. I think they've got an incredible vision. The minister himself has an incredible vision of what education should look like and what the priorities of education are. And if, you see they're putting a larger sort of emphasis on entrepreneurship because they see the value in it. So, when it comes to experimental learning, I think the problem in the past wasn't the specific methods of the learning itself. I think one, it was adoption, right? There weren't enough governments or enough schools or enough institutions willing to take that risk. And I think now we're sort of seeing that change. Governments like the UAEs and others as well, both in the Middle East and beyond, are thinking through newer ways to drive outcomes. So I think, adoption is a problem that's going to be solved shortly. And I think the second thing is there was no way of knowing if these techniques were working or not, right? How do you measure learning outcomes of a very new style of pedagogy without the right sort of, analytics and the right sort of analysis of the data? I think what we're building at ASI and even the UAE Ministry of Education is rolling this out is the ability to get really granular data of how students are feeling about their education. Are they getting smarter? Are they getting better at subjects? Are they becoming more resilient? Are we looking at social emotional learning? So I think today we're at a time where we're building the foundations for those methods, like what Synthesis is working on and what other companies are working on, and ASI as well, to roll out and receive that adoption. But I still think we're quite a few years out from that. But I definitely see the trend shifting. I mean, when I first started the company, it wasn't that long ago, about 2.5 years ago. Governments would never have entertained the idea of an AI teaching their students or an AI tutor teaching their students, even though the tech was still in a very similar place even back then. Today, we're seeing that adoption, that mindset change, and I think visionary countries, like the UAEs, will definitely drive that change. But within a decade from now, I would be very surprised if all education looks the exact same. That would be my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Kudus. Ms. Robin, I would like to ask you about your experience with apolitical, collaborating with some prestigious and top universities. How can we make this collaboration between formal education and especially academic education and corporations and also businesses to fill the gaps between them, especially with the dynamic entrepreneurial nature.
Absolutely, and I don't think it has to be an either or. It's not mutually exclusive. You need both and you need bridges between them. So we, for example, are working with the UAE government to train all 65,000 federal officials in a course we developed with Oxford University, a school at Oxford, on reaching net zero. So it's a very exciting and ambitious collaboration. This government is so ambitious. And the way we have designed that course is to bridge that formal academic heft with practical, applied questions about what does this mean in the context of your job, in the context of your country's climate commitments. We deliver learning in a very social peer-to-peer way, and increasingly the evidence is showing that if you do peer-to-peer learning, it's a much more valuable experience. It naturally translates the theoretical into the applied because you start discussing with your peers their on-the-ground challenges and the reality of those. And then I think AI presents just enormous opportunities to couple through GPTs in particular, the theoretical knowledge with practical considerations. What are your on-the-ground working contexts? What are the challenges, in our case, of that your government is trying to solve? So I think we are slowly and steadily closing that gap, and the future is going to look much more integrated between the formal and the practical.
Yes, thank you very much, Robin Scott, co-founder and CEO of Apolitical. Thank you so much. I would like to thank you, Mr. Kai Rommelt, CEO of Udacity. Thank you, Dr. Nafiz Al-Daqqaq, co-founder and manager partner of BLDR Ventures. And thank you also, Mr. Qudus Pativada, founder and CEO of ASI. Thank you very much, and I would like to thank you as well.